my great delight to introduce you to the 11th Annual Jimmie Dyess Symposium being held here in Augusta, Georgia. My name is Perry Smith, and I will be the host and the narrator for this particular event. It'll last an hour or a little bit less, so please stay with us through this entire episode. And what I want to do is talk about the symposium first, then I want to talk about Jimmie Dyess, and then we'll get into the people that we'll be honoring. First of all, about the symposium. 11 years ago, a man came up to us and said to the museum and said, we need to do something in honoring Jimmie Dyess and maybe make it a fundraiser. And we did, and we've had it now for, this is the 11th year. We always have a Medal of Honor recipient. We're the only town or city in the country that has an individual Medal of Honor recipient coming each year, a different one, for a particular event. But then we decided we ought to really honor other people, including people in our local area who have been just wonderful citizens and support of worthy causes. And so now each year we honor one Medal of Honor recipient and two citizens who have a close connection to Augusta, and you'll meet two of those a little bit later. The symposium has grown. It has been very, very successful. And this year it's a little different because we're doing it virtually because of the problem we have with the epidemic. But I am sure that by next year we'll be back in the museum in the second Thursday of every January. And why we do it then? We do it then because that is the time of Jimmie Dyess's birthday. The Crystal Memorial is here in Augusta, here in the museum, and unveiled every year. And at the base of the memorial is the names of every individual who has received the Distinguished American Award. Not only the Medal of Honor recipients, but also the distinguished citizens who have an Augusta connection. At the very top of this memorial are the three iconic awards, the Medal of Honor, the Carnegie Medal, and the Eagle Scout Award. And then you look at the bottom, you see all the names of the people who have received this award, and we will continue to add those names as more and more people receive these awards as we go through year after year after year. It is here in the Augusta Museum of History. It's on display here on the second floor, very near the place where the Jimmie Dyess and Two Ships Awards are. And so those of you who have not visited the museum should come here, go to the second floor, and see the full display of what we have to honor Jimmie Dyess, to honor the people who have been distinguished Americans, and to honor the people who have served this country so well in combat and in civilian life. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our first distinguished American from the Jimmie Dyess Symposium, Dr. Terry Elam. Rather than a long introduction, I'm going to let him talk about himself, and I may ask him a few questions. Dr. Elam.
Thank you, General Smith. This is an honor to be here to talk to you today. I'm kind of shy about honors because I've understood all over the years you don't get honors for doing anything yourself, you get it for doing it for other folks. So I have spent my life trying to provide service in this community. Even as a young man, I was exposed to a very diverse group of people. My first job was working with the Augusta National during the Masters. It taught me a lot, taught me about respect and responsibility. As I matriculated through college and finished high school here at T.W. Josie, I went to Mercer University for a year, came back home to Payne College, and did not want to teach. But that was the best job I could find when I finished back in 1971. I got an opportunity to go to the Academy of Richmond County, and let me tell you, that was an education over a 10-year period that I considered equal to any college degree I could have earned. The people I worked with there who are now leaders in this community, the teachers I worked with who mentored me, taught me some invaluable things about serving people. And we're not here because we're here to get a paycheck. We're here to make sure that the people we serve become successful. So I got an opportunity after about 11 years at Richmond to take a job working with special needs students at Augusta Tech. And I went there and saw some real needs, especially in math. That was an area that I had a knack for, and I worked in that area. Eventually, I moved to recruitment of students, then admissions, and then economic development, and then president. I learned a lot through all those experiences, but I had to draw on those experiences that were part of my life. So I started looking to people who I admired coming up. And for some reason, I was showered with people around me with military experience, business experience, educational experiences. And they were all my first cousins. So I didn't have to look far for mentors. Many of them had gone on to be very, very successful. But I also had the business side of my family. And the business side of my family had made an impact on me because as a 16-year-old, I was an apprentice electrician. So I knew how to make money. I also knew that education is serving. So when I went to Augusta Tech, it was almost a perfect fit, considering the person who hired me at Augusta Tech had a similar path. He had been in the military, but he had also been a machinist. So he brought something to the table other than just book knowledge. I didn't take long to figure out that knowing something is great, but being able to do something with it. So technical education just fit me to a T. All the students we served over the years, when I was in admissions, people would come in and, you know, they wouldn't do well on the test and they'd say, "Can you give me a chance?" Well, I broke the rules. I gave them a chance. They marched across that stage at graduation. I had a pen that I used to write on the program. This one I didn't give much of a chance, but they made it. I didn't see those people often who made the highest scores. They didn't have what it took to push them through the hard times. So what I found out is, you know, we're getting ready, people ready for work. That's a bad four-letter word for certain people. Some people really didn't think that education leads to work. And that's, when I would tell them that, they would go, "But I just want to go to school." No, what are you going to do with it? So as president, my job was to set the tone, the vision for the college. So over the years, we stopped teaching certain programs. Obviously, there was no reason to teach radio and TV repair, telephone repair, banking and financial services. The ATM took care of that. TVs and phones became disposable. As a leader, you have to be able to make those hard calls. But you also have to have a vision of what are you going to replace them with. So 23 years ago, when I became president, 24 now, whoever would have thought that we would have been teaching nuclear engineering technology or cyber technology? Whoever thought that we would be turning out registered nurses and not just LPNs? Whoever would have thought we would have been teaching health science management, people who are going to deal with records that we're all tied to now, some computer system, our whole medical records. So having a vision to allow that to happen was probably the one thing that I think that helped me. And why did I have that vision? Because I trust people.
It's a wonderful answer. Let me follow up with a little bit. How many folks do you think you, in your long, distinguished life, how many people do you think you touched in a way that changed their lives?
Thousands. Just this past year, I received an email from a student who I talked to in 1989 at his high school. And he wrote this email in 2019. He said, "I want to tell you thank you." And went on to tell me he lives in Augusta now, He's an engineer. He went back to school after he left Augusta Tech and got his 4-year degree in engineering. Married, great family, and he knows why they make me president. And that was a really good compliment. Or to be stopped in Costco by someone in a uniform from a local industry, said, "You introduced me and my wife."
And tell me about, now that you're retired, how are you going to chart your life? What do you see as your goals and objectives over the next 15 or 20 years?
Well, I still want to help people. That's the energy that keeps me going. So if it's just a phone conversation with someone who's going to bounce an idea off of me, and I do get a lot of those phone calls. Matter of fact, I had 2 on the way down here today. What do you think of this? And, you know, I give them my honest opinion, because there are people who want to put businesses here in Augusta. They're not from here, but they know about me. And, you know, I can tell them some of the things they need to look for, the growth areas, the areas that have special tax advantages. My work in economic development has been something that I'm very proud of. As the president, I never gave that to anyone else. I worked and made sure I was right there at every major project that came into this community in the last 15, 20 years. I worked on it in some fashion, even as president.
Well, as we close this up, I want to present to you the Distinguished American Award from the Dyess Symposium. It's sitting between the 2 of us. To describe what it is a silver, pure silver coin that was minted by the U.S. Mint, and it is presented to you for your distinguished service to this community and to this nation and to so many people you touched, and thank you for your great service.
Thank you, General Smith. This is an honor. It's a community honor. It's not just me.
Thank you.
I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
America, which had tried so hard to avoid war, would now face 3 enemies. But it would do so with a sense of unity and purpose which was unequaled in American history. At last, the Americans were involved with sustained rage and determination. The military services would soon be engaged in combat on many fronts. The Marines, much more than the other American military services, could focus its attention on one enemy, the Japanese, and on one area, the Central and Western Pacific. Shortly thereafter, Dyess was assigned to that part of the Marine Corps that was his real love, the infantry. Finally, the years of frustration were over for Dyess, and in February 1943, he and his men would be stationed at Camp Pendleton, California. No longer was Dyess regulated to training people in secondary missions and sending them off to air defense units. At last, he was an integral and important part of the heart and soul of the modern Marine Corps, a combat infantry battalion. Soon after he arrived at Camp Pendleton, Dyess was promoted to lieutenant colonel, and on the 14th of May, 1943, officially assumed command of the battalion, of which he had been acting commander since March. The separate infantry combat battalion now had a new name, the 1st Battalion of the 24th Marine Regiment. The men under his command were all full-fledged members of the United States Marine Corps and very proud of it. But no one was prouder than the 34-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Dyess, who had joined the Marine Corps Reserve as a first lieutenant 7 years earlier in hopes one day of commanding a major operational unit. He was greatly honored to be put in command of 800 combat Marines. On the 20th of July, 1943, the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington directed Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, to mount an operation in January 1944 to capture the Marshall Islands. The campaign for the Marshals was given the code name Operation Flintlock. Of all the joint operations that took place against the Japanese in the first 26 months of the war, Operation Flintlock would prove to be the most important from both a strategic and an operational perspective. Dyess was not only giving directions and support, he was also firing at Japanese positions. As Dyess moved up and down the line, a number of Marines yelled at him to stay low and keep his head down. He ignored their pleas. He wanted to direct the fire of his fellow Marines, and in order to do so, exposed himself to Japanese rifle and machine gun fire. At about 10:45 on D2, the 2nd of February, Dyess rose up once again to observe the enemy firing positions and to direct fire against them. His attention was directed toward the last of the Japanese pillboxes that was still occupied and still sending out deadly fire against the Marines. Within seconds of the time he raised up, Dyess was hit in the head by a Japanese bullet, probably from a machine gun that was firing from the pillbox to his immediate front. Killed instantly, he fell backwards. Moving quickly, Willie Turner, Bob Fleischauer, and 2 others grabbed a stretcher and gently placed him on it. Using this stretcher, they lifted Dyess and, picking their way through the debris of the battlefield, carried him the half-mile distance to the beach. The only child of Jimmie and Connor Dyess, little Connor, had lost, at age 8, a father whom she had said farewell to only a month earlier in California. On April 26, 1944, Admiral Nimitz held a special ceremony to recognize a few heroes of the Pacific War. He made a special point to highlight the heroism of a Marine Corps private and a lieutenant colonel. The lieutenant colonel was Dyess. On July 18th, an official announcement was made that Lieutenant Colonel A.J. Dyess had earned the Medal of Honor on Roy Namor. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next distinguished American from the Jimmie Dyess Symposium, Doug Hastings. Rather than talk about him, I'm going to ask him to talk about himself, his contributions, his combat experience, his work with veterans, and so forth. So Doug Hastings, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, General Smith. I appreciate being here. I'm truly honored to be a part of this program. My work with veterans comes from the fact that I was born in a very Christian, pro-American, veteran-oriented family. And my house had those little stands with marble tops on them, and 8x10 black and white pictures of Uncle Wilbur, who was killed in World War I, Uncle David, who was shot up, wounded several times in World War II. We knew their stories, we knew their history. They were part of the family. We decorated their graves. And when I graduated high school, I won a scholarship to Buffalo State University, and disappointed my father because I turned it down. And it was the only time I've ever seen him cry and get very upset with me. And when he said I could be anything I wanted and somebody else was going to pay for it, I told him, I am going to be anything I want. I'm going in the Army. And I did. Spent 27 years, trained as Army Security Agency, then went to Fort Benning for some follow-on training before doing 4 years in Vietnam with the Army Security Agency and with Signal, later on in support of the field artillery, all over 2 Corps. Spent some time in Pleiku, Anke, Quinh Nhan, all those places I'm sure from your experience you're familiar with. And both of my brothers had been in during Vietnam during the beginning. And one was in the Navy, one was in the Air Force. So it was my time to serve. I was fortunate in that I didn't go in the infantry like 2 of my cousins who were killed there. I survived. It was an experience I would not want to go through again, but I'm glad I did. I thought it was great to serve the country. I have never felt the way a lot of veterans do, that the country left them. I don't feel that way. We had a great country then, and we have a great country now. After coming home, I went to the 1st Infantry Division at Fort Riley, from there to Fort Gordon, to Germany, to Bragg, to Germany, to Fort Gordon, to the Sergeant Major's Academy, and then a final assignment in Fort Richardson, Alaska. One of my favorite assignments, excuse me. And super place to visit, super place to ski and do all those great outdoor things. And I came home, retired here in Augusta. It's a beautiful community, great people. Spent some time going back to college, finishing out a degree, and then went to work for a company owned by a World War II vet downtown. And after 4 years, he had a stroke, was watching. He came to work for 3 hours a day, and he was watching the dedication of the World War II Memorial on Memorial Day of 2004. And he asked me to come up and watch it with him. And after a few minutes, I heard him sniffling, and I said, "Are you all right?" And he started to cry a little bit, and he said, "I wanted to see that so bad. Now I never will," because he was on a little 3-wheel scooter, didn't think he'd ever get there. That kind of touched my heart, being a veteran myself. So I got with one other guy, and we put together one trip to get this one guy to Washington. And we had a total of 40 people on that trip. 28 of them were veterans, World War II vets, some spouses and 2 support people. And while in Washington on that trip, I knew it wasn't going to be the last one. All it took was for one vet after another to come up to me and say, "I have a story I want to tell you, because I know you'll understand." And they would tell me some of the most unbelievable stories about their service. An Army Air Corps pilot who had been shot up so bad, his plane just barely made it back to England. He was wounded, ended up on a hospital ship where he met his future wife, who was a Navy nurse. She was also on that trip. Met a guy who talked about the Black Angels, Army body bearers who would go up on battle sites and retrieve the bodies. And he was stranded one night with no one to protect him in the dark on an island in the Pacific. And the only people around were the body bearers, and they were all African Americans. And they asked him if they could stay up there with him because they were under heavy attack. And he credits them for saving his life, because everybody else around him had been killed. And he had been born and raised in an orphanage in South Carolina, and he talked about how that changed his life. We got back to Augusta at the end of that trip, and one of the wives come up to me and said, "I learned more about what my husband did in World War II in the last 3 days than I have in 63 years of marriage." I can't tell you how much that means to me. And reviewing that trip, I said, "We got to do it again. I got to figure out how, but it's going to be expensive." And word got out from that first trip, and a guy handed me a $10,000 check and said, "How soon can you take another one?" And 1 month later, we did. I have been so blessed over the last 15 years to be the public face, and believe me, that's all I've been, the public face. I'm able to go out and talk about it. By the third trip, I hooked up with Fred Gailey, and we worked together to get the Oral History Project here started. He's done a fantastic job with that. I interviewed some of the first ones that were part of that program but we would trade off. I'd give him World War II vets' names I got. He'd give me some of his. And the last 15 years, over 4,000 people have been on a trip. Most of them World War II vets. 113 of those were three-peaters. World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Over 300 of them were at least two-peaters. World War II and Korea. Several of them that went with some pretty heavy feelings about Korea. A lot of resentment about Korea and what happened after it was over. Once they went to Washington and toured the memorial, I remember a very big guy come back and he said, "I know you can't see it, but I've lost a lot of weight." And I said, "You have?" And he said, "Yes. It left me when I approached that memorial." No one, if I was going to say anything about any gift I've ever received, it would be God gave me a perfect gift when he gave me the Vets to Washington project. And every once in a while somebody will say, "What you've done for them is so great." And I'll say, "Nowhere near as much as what it's done for me." My mother made combat boots and trigger finger mittens in a factory in World War II on an Army contract. Her mother was working beside her. So I was raised in a family that taught respect for God, country, and family. And I've tried to live my life doing that. Harold Mays was a great sponsor before the project was over, to the tune of $100,000. Others that kind of matched him was the owner of Zaxby's Restaurants, George During. And then as I would go around and speak to different groups and people about the project, we had a rule. The first World War II vet that I took, that one that wanted to get there, when it was over and I said I was going to do it again, he said, "Well, don't ask for money. Tell our story. Tell them about America. Tell them about veterans. Tell them how you feel. And you won't have to ask them." Well, I didn't think it would work. It worked for 15 years. And we've taken veterans, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And we've never taken a trip without hearing the most unbelievable stories.
Now tell me, Doug, where else have you taken the vets besides to Washington, D.C.?
We started 7 years ago, we started taking them to the World War II Museum in New Orleans. Several of them down there have also, they take whatever memorabilia they have, and they've set up a table and talked to the people who visit the museum. They have been interviewed by the museum down there. We've taken them down specifically. I don't know if you remember Paul Harless. He was the first one that we had interviewed down there. He's the one that served with Roosevelt. And they interviewed him for 5 hours. And so we've taken about 25 trips to that museum. We also take them on one-day trips down to the Infantry Museum at Fort Benning, the Mighty 8th Air Force Museum in Savannah, Patriots Point in Charleston, the Medal of Honor Museum. We've taken them down to the Submarine Museum, St. Mary's. Once in a while, we'll take a group over to Fort Jackson, where they are, the tour is led by a drill sergeant who takes them around to walk through basic training and talk to trainees. We've taken them to Parris Island. And we took one group up to the D-Day Memorial. It was a small group that consisted mostly of those who were involved in D-Day. We took them up there to the memorial. And we took, well, just a couple of years ago, we took a group up to Toccoa to the Band of Brothers Museum. So it's been a great benefit to them to go back and relive some of the memories that they realize mean much more to them than they thought. And getting them to tell their story in the Oral History Project has been absolutely wonderful.
So what does the future hold for Doug Hastings as you look forward? Because you're no longer such a young man.
Well, that is true. And you know, that old saying, old age isn't for wimps, and I'm beginning to believe that. I want to, when this COVID is over, I want to continue with interviewing, because we've gone on from World War II to Korea and Vietnam. And there's about 18,000 Vietnam veterans within 150 miles of Augusta. And I'd like to get as many of those interviewed as possible.
There's one thing which is preeminent in my mind. It's a lot of years later, but it's a very emotional thing to me still. And that is what these Marines were able to do. The training they had, which was so intensive, prepared them for this. And I don't mean just prepared them in how to handle their weapons and so on. It prepared them emotionally and motivationally. And therefore, what they were able to do under horrendous circumstances, where men are dying all around you, if enemy's fire is coming down your throat, nobody falters. When the lieutenant gives you the order, it gets done.
But I owe, what do I say, 18, just about 60 years of life to Dyess. And the colonel, I have never forgotten him. And when I first saw Connor dedicating that field, I had to tell her what I knew about him and what I felt about him. I thought it was important for her to know. He gave me 60 years of life and a family and so on. Sometimes people will say, well, what did you think of Dyess? And there's a phrase that comes to my mind. He was a man among boys, all the way.
The Carnegie Heroes Fund Commission awarded its first medal to 17-year-old Louis Ballman, who in 1904 saved a childhood friend from drowning. In 1956, Dorothy Koch, a dancer, was awarded the medal when she saved the lives of 2 policemen in a shootout in a Cleveland nightclub. In the shootout, she was hit by a bullet and was paralyzed for the rest of her life. A world-ranked boxer, Riddell Stith, was one of only 4 people to have earned the Carnegie Medal twice. In 1958, he risked his life to rescue a man from drowning in the Ohio River near Louisville, Kentucky. 2 years later, he attempted the rescue of another man from drowning. In the first instance, both men survived, but in the second attempt, both men drowned. Anyone interested in learning more about the Carnegie Medal is invited to read A Century of Heroes. Edited by Doug Chambers, this book highlights the heroic acts of many recipients, and a brilliant chapter entitled Why Do They Do It?, explains the various motivations which causes individuals to act with such courage and compassion. Okay, it's my great pleasure to introduce Mike Rose, who is the recipient of a Medal of Honor and also will be the recipient of the Distinguished American Award from the Jimmie Dyess Symposium. He's coming to us from Huntsville, Alabama, which is his home, and we're going to ask him to tell a little bit about his life and all of the things that he has run into and contributed not only to the military, but also to his community. So Mike, it's over to you.
Well, I think I'll start. I joined the Army in April of 1967 and went to Fort Ord, then to Fort Gordon, and then jump school, and then Special Forces training. And after that, I was assigned to the 7th at Fort Bragg, and then I went to Thailand, Vietnam, Mac Sag, where I received most of these awards. And after that, I was stationed in Panama with the 8th Special Forces Group, and from there I went to OCS and became a field artillery officer, and I served about just that 20 years and retired. And during that time frame, I was in Korea, Thailand, Panama, and Germany, in various places in the States like New Mexico, California, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Georgia, and what have you. After service, I worked as an instructional designer in the manufacturing industry, creating training and writing maintenance manuals for manufacturing. And I did that up until, I retired in 2010. Last couple of years, I worked with Sherwin-Williams doing paint as a odd job just to keep myself busy. I think it's funny, Margaret found the job. It was like 20 hours a week. I think she did that to get me out of the house for at least 20 hours a week. So, and what I've done over the years, I've been in the Knights of Columbus as primary focus on my charity. And I've worked many years with them, raising funds for such things as, one of my favorite things is the intellectually disabled for adults, which is 18 and over, because a lot of people don't realize that once you become 18, a lot of the federal, almost all the federal and state funding for anybody that has a disability of such, it falls off the table. So it's left to churches and different organizations, and I will say that a lot of good companies, defense companies, private companies, markets are very generous in supporting the ARC, which was here in Huntsville, ARC of Madison County, that does everything from education of caregivers to they have employment opportunities they find for these individuals that gives them a sense of purpose. And I'll tell you, the young people and the older folks that have mental, or I should say intellectually disabled issues, they're great employees. In fact, one of the things we found, it's kind of funny in a way, the only issue you have with them is you have to get them to go home, because if you didn't, they'd work till they dropped. And it gives them a sense of pride, and they pay taxes, they participate in community activities, and it's just a great thing to see. And then one of my other things is I work with the Knights in supporting the Rose of Sharon, which takes care of some of the most vulnerable homeless in our town. And that with the Catholic Center of Concern, which they provide the medicine and the Rose of Sharon feeds them. So, and they work with each other. And what's great about it is Rose Sharon's a Protestant organization, and of course the center is Catholic, and they mutually support each other by making sure people are healthy and are fed and have clothing, because the Rose of Sharon does provide clothing. I'm also involved in the Youth Leadership Development Program, which was started by Dr. Welsh out of Birmingham. We now have 95 high schools and 27 universities, and we it's a leadership program that starts in the 9th grade and it goes through the 12th, and the seniors can apply for scholarships, and they're fully funded scholarships that we offer. I have one at the University of Alabama. Gary Biker, another Mellon Award Honor recipient, has one at Auburn. Benny Atkins, this program supports his Benny Atkins Foundation for providing educational funding for special operations troops coming off of active duty to supplement what they get from their benefits from the government and military service while they're going to school. And I'm a board member on that, and we raise money. And one of the things that I'm so proud of this is that anybody who applies for this scholarship, it doesn't matter who your parents are, how much they make or don't make. We don't consider their ACTs or the SATs. It's based on character. And for example, last year, one young lady who, I don't know how she did it, maintained a 4.0 average. She, one parent is in prison and one has a drug problem. And she has done really well. And we have a 99, almost 100% graduation rate with this program through the various universities that these kids go to. And it makes me feel good that I'm able to participate in this, because I'm looking for the future, because as you well know, sir, you know, I'm kind of long in the tooth, and I love this country, and we have to depend on the ones that come after us to hold the values that we hold and to do the good things that we've done. And so this is my way of paying it forward, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm the luckiest human being that has ever been born on planet Earth. I am, my wife and I live nicely. We live in a nice house, a nice environment. I mean, I'm not Bill Gates or anything, and so I feel like I'm obligated, because the good Lord has been so good to me, that I should take some of that effort and treasure and do something with it to pay it forward, so some young person or some older person or someone with an intellectual disability can have a little better life now, and maybe they can get together in the future when I'm gone and pay it forward also. And that's basically, and I must say that I do this in conjunction with my dear wife, Margaret. So that's about my life in a nutshell, sir.
That's a wonderful rundown, Mike, but let me ask you a couple of questions. One is, having received the Medal of Honor within the last few years, how has that changed your life across the board?
Well, I get invitations to go to places that from all over the country. I was going to quite a few to support different activities, military and organizations and non-military that are connected with the service, and then other fundraising type organizations and schools. One of the things that I'm really get excited for is I get a lot of invitations to go to speak to elementary and high schools, and that is something that I do in conjunction with the Medal of Honor Society, in which we have a program, and we provide a training that develops. It's a character development program. It stems around character development and patriotism. And that has given me the opportunity to talk to young people about how great this country is. Sir, you would not believe the people that nobody knows who they are or what they do, but without them, the whole railroad system here would go off the rails. They're just wonderful, wonderful, great human beings. And that's the thing that I like the best about with this medal now, that I've had the opportunity to find these people and to meet these people, and it's really a joy.
Thank you so much, Mike. I think that's probably all we need, but you've been wonderful. Your philosophy is great. It's going to be a great event, even though we're not going to be able to get together, and you will get at least a couple of presents from us to honor you as the Distinguished American from the Jimmie Dyess Symposium, and congratulations, sir. A community, an institution, or a nation can be judged in large part by how well it honors its heroes. Jimmie Dyess is remembered in the United States Navy, the United States Marine Corps, in the Republic of the Marshall Islands, in Augusta, Georgia, at Clemson University, by the Carnegie Heroes Fund Commission, by the Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation, and by the Boy Scouts. Although the USS Dyess was decommissioned in 1981, crew members from the USS Dyess get together every year to honor Dyess and the grand ship named in his honor. The Marine Corps has honored Dyess by naming the headquarters of the 24th Marine Regiment in Kansas City in his honor. On the island of Roy Namor in the Marshall Islands, the key airfield is named Dyess Field. This island provides a vital link in America's space tracking system, which serves the Department of Defense and NASA. On the outskirts of Augusta, Dyess Parkway, which was opened and dedicated in 1998, connects the main gate of Fort Gordon with Interstate I-20. This vital four-lane parkway would be essential in any national emergency involving the soldiers of Fort Gordon. In the Augusta Museum of History in downtown Augusta, there is a permanent exhibit on the second floor which honors Colonel Dyess, the USS Dyess, and the USS Augusta. On Heroes Overlook in Augusta, at 10th Street and the Savannah River, Dyess's heroism is highlighted. On May 7, 2004, at Clemson University, at the commencement services, 13,000 people were in attendance. One individual was given an honorary degree, Doctor of Humanities. That individual was Aquila James Dyess. The citation for this award stated in part, Clemson University holds Lieutenant Colonel A. James Dyess and his lifetime of service above self in highest esteem. It is a distinct privilege to honor him for his untold contributions to our nation's defense and for his acts of valor beyond the call of duty. We present to his family the posthumous honorary degree of Doctor of Humanities. On October 16, 2004, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Carnegie Heroes Fund Commission celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Carnegie Medal. A book, A Century of Heroes, was published at that time. Many of the remarkable stories of civilian heroism are outlined in this book. Chapter 4, entitled The Remarkable Jimmie Dyess, tells his unique story. In the meantime, the Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation published a book, Medal of Honor, by Peter Collier. This book highlights the life stories of our living Medal of Honor recipients. In the chapter on the history of the Medal of Honor, the story of Jimmie Dyess is told. In 2011, the Jimmie Dyess Symposium was initiated in Augusta, Georgia. The symposium has 5 major goals. First, to preserve and enhance the legacy of Marine Lieutenant Colonel Jimmie Dyess, the only person to have received America's 2 highest awards for heroism, the Medal of Honor and the Carnegie Medal. Second, to salute outstanding Americans who, over a lifetime, have made major contributions to their nation, their community, and their fellow citizens. In 2011, Medal of Honor recipient Jack Jacobs was honored. In 2012, Congressman Doug Bernard and Medal of Honor recipient Bruce Crandall were honored. All 3 received the Jimmie Dyess Symposium's Distinguished American Award. 3, to support the Medal of Honor Foundation by drawing widespread attention to its mission by perpetuating the Medal of Honor's legacy through outreach and collaborative efforts. 4, to welcome people from all over America who visit Augusta to attend this symposium and to meet and visit with the honorees. 5, to lend public support for the Augusta Museum of History. In this award-winning museum is a permanent exhibit which honors Jimmie Dyess. As the only person to have earned America's 2 highest awards for heroism, Dyess and his story may well remain a unique legacy for all time.